Okay, so now that we've got all of our points, let's figure out how we get the path from our CSV file onto our points themselves, so that when we run this whole TOPS networks inside of Unity, it'll actually instantiate the proper tree, rock, or bush on the appropriate point. Okay, so let's jump over into Houdini and get it going. Okay, so first things first, what we want to do is we want to get the CSV file that is being generated by TOPS. Okay, so I'm going to create a table import node right here. And this table import node basically takes all the information from a CSV file and creates a point for it. All right, so we're going to get foliage CSV. And so we want to point it to that CSV file, which is inside of our project and inside of our CSV folder. We'll hit accept. There we go. And this will be fine for now because we're going to promote all this stuff up to our HDA later on. All right. So what we want to do is we want to turn this guy on just so we can verify our results. And so what we're doing here is we're saying that we're going to look at column 0. And it probably would be best to have, let's go open up our CSV file over here. And let's go and right here, we'll just go and click this guy so we can open it up in Excel. All right, so what we have here is column 0, right? And what we're saying inside of our table import node is we're going to look at column 0, okay? And we're going to determine what kind of data is coming out of this. So in this case, it's just a string, all right? So what we want to do is we want to call this our path, or we'll call it the, yeah, path is fine. And that's just a name that I'm giving it. You can see down here in the the geometry spreadsheet, we now have a path value. All right, and this is going to be of type string. And you can see by doing that, I now have a point for every single row in my CSV file. So let's actually just expand this all the way here. Boom. All right, so now we have a point. So if we were to zoom in on this and turn on our point display here and turn on point numbers, you can see I have 16 points. Pretty cool. All right, let me actually move this back down just to get it back to default state there. All right, so on each one of these points now we have an attribute that is storing our particular string. But you'll notice that the first point just has this path called file. Now, that's not going to work for us because we don't really need it. So one thing we can do is we can just get rid of it. It's always point 0, right? And that's basically just because in our CSV file we have this header right here, basically called file. All right, so we don't need that. So what I'm going to do is just throw down a blast node here and set this to points like so, and just get rid of point 0. And there we go. So now we have a nice clean data set to work with. Okay, so now what we need to do is we actually need to get the relative reference here. So I want all the string data after this assets right here. I want that whole thing, okay? I don't want all this stuff over here. So we need to do a little bit of vex to clean up that string. All right, so I'm going to create a wrangle here. Alrighty, and we are going to clean strings like so. Cool, so what we want to do now is get the current path. All right, because we're rolling over points. Okay, so we're going to go through this list one at a time. So I'm going to say string cur path. All right, so this is a local variable that we're storing inside of our attribute wrangle. So cur path is going to be equal to our at path. Okay, so that string that we have created with our particular table import node. So we have the path now in this cur path, this local variable, all right? And so what we want to do is we want to find where, at what index in the string, all right, does the asset string start? All right, so what we're going to do is say I at index is equal to a find. All right, so find allows us to find a particular string. So let's actually take a look at that really quick in the help over here. All right, so what we need to do is we need to provide it a string, a couple strings. All right, so we want to give it the haystack. It's funny that they called it this, but so the haystack would be our path. All right, so that's the haystack, and the needle that we want to find is going to be assets. All right, like so. All right, so if we were to look at that now, if we were to look at the index attribute, you can see that we have 57. that is literally the index in the string where this particular path starts. So with that information, we can say, okay, well, if we do in fact have a value, all right, so if at index is greater than 0 or equal to 0, all right, because it could be index 0. If it's greater, then that means we have a path, all right, so we found something. So what we need to do is we need to just clean up the path using that information. Okay, so what we can do is use the sprintf function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say s at path, so we're going to rewrite it basically and get rid of all the junk we don't need. And we're going to do a sprint f, and we want to provide it the path, all right, so we're going to give it the cur path, all right, and then we want to basically have it start at the index and then just keep the rest of it, all right. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to say at index, and I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. We're going to do cur path, and we're going to get a specific index, so we're going to say at index colon, and that basically gets us a cleaned up path. So I'm going to save this, and there you go. So you can see now we got rid of all the junk, but we have all the stuff that we actually need. So we have assets, and then all the way to our actual prefab for all of our particular paths. Perfect. So that is pretty good. One thing I do want to do now is I also want to provide some sort of way for me to tell what kind of prefab is this. Is this a tree? Is this a rock? And what we could do is we could utilize that find function again to see if it's in a tree folder, or if it's in a rock folder, or if it's in a bush folder, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide another index. So we're going to say I at type is equal to 0. So we're just going to default it to 0. So we'll say, let's just say that trees are always equal to 0, okay? So if we do in fact have a path, then let's go and see what folder it's in, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say int tree path is equal to find, and we'll give it the cur path, all right, so our haystack, and then we'll give it the needle. So this time I want to look for trees, all right, because our folder over here is called trees. So if this actually returns something greater than or equal to 0, that means we actually are in a tree folder, all right. So what we can say is we can say if tree path is greater than or equal to 0, that means we are a tree. So I can say, or we, actually what I wanted to do is, because by default we are doing the trees, so 0 is trees, let's actually look for rocks. And this, I just did this so that it actually cleaned up the amount of code that we had. So my apologies there for going down the wrong path there. All right, so what we're going to do is check if the rock path now is greater than or equal to 0, which means that we're actually in a rock folder. So I can set the type now to, we'll say I at type is equal to 1. And look at that. You can see it, that for all the rocks, our type is now 1. And then I could do the same thing for the bushes, all right? So let's do this. Same operation here. Okay, so we'll say the bush path, like so, and we're going to be looking for bushes. And if we do in fact have, or if we do in fact, or if we have found the bushes folder, then basically we are type 2. That means we are a bush. And look at that. So now trees are 0, rocks are 1, and bushes are 2. Perfect. So this is going to get us all set up appropriately. All right, we could even go one step further. We could drop down a blast node here. All right, we could say just get the trees. So get trees. And we can use that type. So we can say at type is equal to 0. And we'll set this to points. And we'll say delete non-select. And you can see that leaves me with just all of my trees. So you can see how you can start to really massage all this data into exactly what you need. All right, so let's say we're going to get our rocks like so, and we'll just organize these a little bit better. So rocks go first, trees are second, and bushes will be last. So rocks are 1. So this gives me all of my rock prefabs in one node here. And then we're going to get our bushes over here. And bushes are of type 2. And there we go. So now we have all of the bushes. Cool. All right, so I'm going to close the lecture out there. And in the next lecture, what we're going to do is get this hooked up so that we're actually writing the path to all these points. Cool.